Here, there it is. It's turned blue. We're on. We're live. All right, now I'm going to make sure you guys can all see that. I got to put you on share screen, all of you, so you can see what I see. So let's share screen.
Well, what I was going to just do is pull up the actual video stream here, so I can see where things are at.
Oh, do you want to let Ramon go?
Oh yeah, that's fine. I can.
No. He can drive. I'm just pulling up on the YouTube, and I can see the chat, etc.
Well, can you see the screen now? You see what I'm looking at?
I see it. I see it on the phone.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn my phone sideways. So
if you want to control it, I can let you control it. I just don't know how we're going to do it with the screen.
We're fine with that. Let's not, don't change horses midstream and whatnot.
Okay. Because we can just go, you can take the...
Yeah, because sometimes you fall off.
You can share your screen.
Yeah, because when you do that,
if you, let's see here. So you're on the project log. Go, so scroll down a little bit. Not that far.
I better let you drive. How about, tell you what.
It's okay. Just, so you're looking at the project. What we need is the papers. There's 2 papers in the project.
Right here?
No, hold on. Just scroll up. You're going too fast. Just scroll up. Let's see here.
That's the top.
Yeah. Let's see. Click the updates. Where it says updates there?
Where is this?
Right.
Upper right, updates, yeah. It won't let me.
It might not open.
Won't let me. Why don't you just take over?
Yeah, I see something different when I am logged in, of course.
You want me to just let you drive?
No.
Oh, okay.
We want to help people. So ResearchGate is not as easy to use as Academia. That's all.
This is ResearchGate. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the papers that I have the most math, or the dark matter series also is on ResearchGate, but papers that have the most math I put up on ResearchGate because I'm challenging the mainstream.
Right.
Wall Formula follows me on there. Scroll down. Let's see where are we looking at here? All right, we'll click the. Okay, there's one article. So right click on the article title and then open a new tab for that one.
Open a new tab. Okay.
And then scroll down and let's find the other paper. Scroll down. There it is. That's the other one. You can just click that. Yep. Just click it.
Okay.
That's the one we're going to start with.
Okay. All right, we're all set.
How you doing, guys?
Yeah, good, Ramon.
Hello, everybody. Okay.
I just thought this would be an interesting topic, Ramon, for you to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Andy,
a lot of people probably aren't aware of your knowledge of it.
Well, Andy, what happened is Andy asked me to come on and talk about Chinese medicine as it relates to the cosmology.
Okay.
And as it happens, I'm not sure he knew this or not, but I did an entire 3-phase experiment in the clinic a couple of years ago.
Okay.
2018, looks like. And used electromagnetometers to actually measure data and followed the space watch and moon phases and everything all in one paper. And there were 4 things I wanted to do with the research, but it's just time hasn't permitted me to do a follow-up. The exciting thing about this work is that it showed how important electric fields were to energetic medicine. It proved why, using magnetic fields, that we haven't really found chi, so to speak. And I liken it to this. So when people do qigong and tai chi, they'll sometimes play with the ball of energy in between the hands.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the feeling that you get when you play with that ball of energy is like you have a magnet situation. We call it like a cotton ball, or sometimes it feels like taffy. And it does feel similar to if you take two refrigerator magnets off and you try to put them against each other and then they repel. So it's only natural that for dozens, maybe hundreds of years, people have thought that chi would be magnetism. In fact, I did a whole paper pre-EPMC, so years ago, called Chi and Scalar Magnetic Waves. It was inspired by Professor Mayl, that's Meyl, and that paper is still up on the academia. It's just that doesn't fit any of the EPMC standards. However, I'd like to one day go back to it. And even there, okay, I'm an electrical engineer. So years ago, I'm doing acupuncture, I'm doing Chinese sciences, I'm doing all sorts of work, and I'm still thinking in terms of magnetic fields. This is the problem that is throughout our culture. So the real truth of it is that the reason why you feel that between your hands is that your hands are having capacitance. Charges are being brought to the surfaces of the hands, and then you're having a charge field interaction. Now, when I started the experiment, I even then fully expected to find magnetic fields. I had a hope that we would see something with electricity, and I did measure at one point. I measured the interferences in the different clinics to just show what kind of EMF interference we would get in the environment. Computers, phones, there were radios, there's table heaters, and regardless, there just wasn't a lot of magnetic evidence. But what was interesting is that pain was correlated with the electric field. More importantly, the change in the electric field divided by the change in pain, self-reported pain levels that people would have, always exceeded 1 in all 3 experiments. Now, as I tightened the controls, the amount of change in the electric field per change in their pain ordinal level decreased. And we'll see that in the paper. But what I became interested in as the experiment continued was finding out, could there be other sources? So in one of them, we tried to eliminate static electricity. We looked at space weather and cross-correlated with, the solar proton data. So that's in the paper. Looked at moon phase, and there was something interesting with the moon phase. It's not conclusive proof, but using the moving averages, something interesting also happened. Now, it's been a little bit since I looked at this paper, so it'll be sort of new for me too. So with that in mind, let's go into the paper, and then that'll lead us to the other paper, which I will explain how I came up with the concept of charge distributive networks. If we get into the deep Chinese medicine, then that'll be fun, But right now, I want to approach this from the cosmology.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Andy, this is what you wanted to do, right?
He's probably muted. He's probably doing something.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, that's correct, Ramon.
Okay, all right. Fair enough.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, anytime you want to, you may have to download. I think you can just scroll. Oh, you can click the read full text. That's the button you have to do.
Which one do I click?
It says read full text.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because I think if you just start scrolling, it goes to like pictures. Okay. Okay, we can skip the abstract and go into some of the first results.
Okay.
So a little note, Test Lab is the name I was coming up with for the lab I wanted to build, and I probably still will.
Okay.
So that's the symbol there.
Yeah.
It's just it hasn't become a priority at the moment, but that's where I was headed back in 2018. Okay, so we're using a Trifield 100XE. People can they can buy those on Amazon. They're pretty reliable. They're analog, they're not digital. So you can keep going. Well, let's take a look at some of the results. So what I would do is, of course, I would go and I would hover the electromagnetometer over the affected region. And I forget how I constructed the controls for the first one. I think I just used random sites on the body. Now, as with any intervention therapy, this is a key thing that people don't understand about acupuncture research. There is no double-blind intervention. You can't do a double-blind surgery, right?
Right.
The person doing the intervention has to know. This isn't even single-blind because the person is aware that they are being acupunctured. They're all being acupunctured. There is actually no placebo in acupuncture. All placebo acupuncture actually is acupuncture because if you needle the body at all, that's acupuncture. If you put the tube to the body, you are doing a form of acupuncture, which is acupressure. So there's no puncture, but there's still pressure, and then that acupressure already affects the nervous system. However, in this case, everybody in these experiments all were receiving acupuncture, and they all knew they were receiving acupuncture. But they were asked, of course, to be honest about their level of pain coming in and going out. They also had different types of conditions. So that's another thing about the experiment. Keep going. There's a lot of text in the experiment. So you can see here, how the experiment was designed, what kind of the live stream's a little bit behind. I don't know why. It seems to lag a little bit.
Yeah, it lags about 20, 30 seconds. I don't know why either. I didn't plan that. It just does it automatically.
Gotcha. Okay. So the very first one that we see here is, changes in pain, changes in the electric field, and changes in the control. And what you see is the changes in the electric field were very significant in phase 1, and then they got less in phase 2, and then the controls in phase 3. But you see that it always exceeded the change in pain. You see that? So the red always exceeded the blue, but the green never exceeded the blue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, it exceeded it. Let's see here. I can't see what that says.
You want to just drive, buddy?
No, it's okay. So the standard deviation. The standard deviation exceeded, but the actual experiment, the control did not exceed. And phase 1 did not have very strict controls. It was a test of concept, basically. So that's what that graph shows.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay.
So again, just more of showing the same, showing the change in pain, the change in when they came in versus when they went out. One of the neat things about this experiment was there was a very consistent result where, if I remember correctly, there was a 48% change in their self-reported pain levels across all 3 experiments. So in a single visit, they would, on average, reduce their pain levels at the affected region by 48%. And the standard deviation between all 3 experiments was very low for that.
Okay.
And the same thing with the pain in the initial and the differential in the pain. So you can see the standard deviation very low. And that's very good for experiment. That's all that.
What does the blue represent?
That's the change, and anytime you see the D, it means a differential. It's the change in the pain.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
So the change in the pain, and then the pain that they initially came in.
So the red's the pain that they came in,
Right.
and the blue's the pain that they left with, and
So
the purple
is the percentage variation.
Oh, that's the percentage variation. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And then there's the standard deviations for all 3.
Oh, I see. Okay. I just didn't know what this meant. Okay.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of that kind of thing throughout this because I write like an engineer.
I see.
Continue?
Okay.
This is just showing the
Yeah, but that's all right.
clinics, so the majority of patients were seen in the Lexington Clinic versus the Berea Clinic. Continue.
Okay.
This is just about the eSIM devices when an electrostimulation was used. Keep going. This is so people can, and there's the tri-field device itself. Keep going. This is so people can repeat the experiment. All right, and this is the number of men versus number of women. Okay, so now this graph is just showing, you know, the differentials of pain, the differentials of electric field, and then their standard deviations, and then, you know, their maximums. And then I have a number of stats that are in they're not pertinent. I mean, they're pertinent if you're doing the study and if you're trying to repeat the study, but they're not that pertinent. They're, you know, max values. It's a way of looking at things, you know, looking at these standard deviations and going, okay, how far different are some of their, you know, results. So in the case of the electric field, there were some really wild swings. Obviously, you can't have a standard deviation at 39% with the pain levels, but with the electric fields, I mean, it could be really wild. They could have a very high electric field coming out of a bundle of nerves, or none. You continue down. Some of these graphs will tend to skip because it's just not that interesting. That's showing right there how the controls continued to tighten.
Okay.
Right, which you notice is still ended up above 1. Now the question naturally arises: is there a way to design the experiment to get it even tighter, to where finally the differential of the electric field falls below the change in the pain? Maybe. This would sort of tend to suggest that, but it's important to remember too that this experiment, the 3 experiments they're all physically different and they're designed differently. So it may very well be that it reverses trend in phase 4. There's actually a higher differential of electric field over differential pain, but the trend chronologically, and that could be to do with the time of year that it was done, because obviously I was doing phase 1, I think, in the winter. I think phase 2 happened in the spring, and I think phase 3 happened in the summer.
Okay.
Okay, and so the winter is known for being staticky.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
So continue.
So what you're saying, Ramon, is that the static or the electric in the atmosphere can change a person's pain.
Correct. And we want to get to that. So let's continue. This is just talking about the phase 2 designs. Let's skip on beyond, get beyond that, get beyond phase 3 design. You can see the different kinds of, so phase 3, lots of different kinds of conditions being treated. Those are the actual ICD-10 codes. Just keep going. These are the moon phases, so you can see that, you know, it was a pretty good sampling. You know, first quarter sampling is kind of low, but the rest of them, I mean, there's a decent showing of different kinds of moon phase. Keep going. So if you divide those roughly, you end up with almost 50-50. You end up with a little bit more on the yin side of the moon than the yang side of the moon.
I see.
Yeah, which is
so
pretty.
Is that a little bit more people or a little bit more pain?
Actually, what the results showed was not that it mattered what side of the moon that you were on, but if you were changing. So if you were going to a full moon or to a new moon, that's what mattered. Very interesting. Because in the Chinese medicine, that's exactly what they would say. And, famously, you know, people who are working in psychiatric wards or in emergency conditions say that new moons are definitely you're going to tend to see more there. And I've had encounters with violent and deranged individuals happen on new moons far more than I've ever been worried about on the full moons. So that's just an interesting thing. So, you know, looking at these different modalities, there wasn't really enough cupping cases to be honest with you. So, you know, tonight we'll just stick with the acupuncture cases. But so this is a breakdown with the different, you know, moon phases, etc. in phase 3. Keep going. Just more about conditions. And I forget that chart. Let's just keep going because that's not going to be. It's the EMF profile, right? The EMF profile from the clinics. So not interesting. interference, right? I'm just documenting interference. The whole goal is to document as much as possible. So
that's just putting,
could
that's just putting it together so that you can get a consistent, a relatively consistent.
right. And the treatment rooms aren't near most of those things that are listed, but. All right, so here we're just seeing the changes in pain, the changes in measurement, and the maximum changes. When you take the phase 1 results maximum, you see a huge change in their electric fields, huge change on the maximum. But on their average, it's averaging about 8 to 9. What is that? 8.95 volts per meter change.
Oh.
That's pretty good. Keep going down. And then what's going to happen is it's going to show that in various graphical ways. But the result that people need to consistently remember is that the electric field would change on an average greater in number of volts per meter than their ordinals of self-reported pain. This is very important that it's self-reported pain. So number one, is it reliable data? We don't know. When you have enough people involved in a study, and you show that between the 3 studies, there's a very small standard deviation in the results. In this case, like I said, about a 48% change in their self-reporting of pain from when they came in to when they were leaving. You tend to think that it's not the fault of the medicine, but you do always still wonder about the quality of the self-reporting in the pain, but there's no other way to do it because there's no at the current that I know of objective way to get their pain values other than asking them. And it is there's been a lot of argument back and forth, as I understand it in the research, as to the value of the 0 to 10 pain scale, where 10 is it's terrible. I have noticed that some people will never say 10, even if it really is that bad, and some people will say 11 out of 10 when it may not be nearly as bad as other people's pain. So you got to wonder realistically how good can the research be. But when you have a consistency of change in that self-reporting over time and averaged among hundreds and hundreds of people, you tend to believe that, and then you just go back to the electric field. If the electric field is always changing more than 1 to 1 in volts per meter per change in the pain, and the control is never going over 1 to 1, then you tend to think, okay, there's something here. It isn't a verification per se, but it's pretty strong indication that the electric field is really what we need to be looking at when we are evaluating health, not the magnetic field. Because guess what? The magnetic field didn't show anything. It was statistically non-significant. You could not get a reliable change in the magnetic field at any point, according to the tri-field. Now, maybe different equipment would do different, but I did try using a different piece of equipment at one point, and it also didn't show anything to do with magnetism. So this idea of that chi is magnetic, I've seen it around a long time from the Tai Chi field, and it solely came from people feeling the cotton ball, so to speak, between their hands. And that is how it's likened, and it's called the cotton fist or whatever in Tai Chi. But it's not magnetism. It's capacitance. It's charges interacting, creating an electric field between the hands. And that leads to some interesting facts, as the proper way you should hold a Buddha hand, for example, where the pad of your thumb should actually hover above large intestine 1 to create a capacitive junction there, and then you get kind of an acceleration in the loop of the hand, if people know what a Buddha hand looks like. Scroll down. So this is just more interesting ways of looking at the data, and then I provide my own criticisms. So we try to stay consistent within the science. Though we're doing acupuncture. It's interesting. This paper went over the heads of the acupuncture journal. I sent it in. They didn't understand it, so they wouldn't publish it. But it's electricity. Electricity, for some reason, we all use it, but nobody wants to talk about it. I have no idea what that's about.
Yeah, no.
And so this is just showing the different sample sizes and the changes in the electric fields. It's very interesting stuff. But you're going to get with more of the same type of results. And again, each of the phases got tighter and tighter. So as we go to phase 2, we see similar results. The max average is, of course, higher because it's the largest changes averaged. And then you have the controls are getting tighter, and other modalities that don't involve conduction, right? Don't involve metal. You saw a less change in the electric field, right? So massage, for example, you saw less of a change in the electric field. Okay, can go down.
I was going to
This is
ask
some
you.
years ago, so I'm kind of trying to remember my own work.
I was going to ask you what. So let's say magnetic bracelets. Do they help?
No, of course they help with the circulation because the magnetism is affecting the iron in the blood.
Okay.
We know that if you use a strong enough electric field, you can absolutely see that on the. You could put a stake on a slab and you can start pulling blood with it. And I've used magnets to great effect in meditation, but it is when it comes to finding bad energy. Remember, the quest here was to find chi, and what we ended up finding is there's a lot of similarity between chi and charge. There's not 100%, but it's a more than 80% overlap. However, when the person has their chi is circulating again, they don't have any electric field, all zeros. If you have a successful treatment, the nerves are so calm, there is zero electric field happening.
Okay.
Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. If you didn't do a good enough job, there would still be an electric field present in the affected area.
Okay.
So everything would be in balance then.
Right.
Ramon.
Which means that we're not technically finding chi, but we're definitely finding what bad chi is. So what the Indians called bad medicine, turns out it's just charge. Now, as to whether it's spiritual charge, I mean, there are arguments out there that it's, it's the spirit world is a form of ether and it's bad energy. I mean, yeah, maybe, that's not the purpose of this experiment. Continue down. So these are just, comparing with non-conductive modalities, and then these are magnitude changes. Again, it's getting academic, so it's a lot of numbers. Let's go down to, let's keep scrolling down till we get into the moon and sun stuff. That's where it really starts to get fun. Okay, that page there might be interesting. Go back up to that page. Nope, go up. This page. Let me see what that one is. Changing the ratios, the electric field ratios, and the pain data. Yeah, that's going to be kind of a hard one to go over, but it does show that there's a very consistent behavior, and there's a few outliers. That's how you can interpret that. So continue down.
Just tell me when to stop.
Yeah, hold on, right there. So more phase 3 standard deviations. Yeah, probably it's more the same stuff. It's just, again, data. Delta changes, that's just more data. Just continue down. Modality. So just looking at modalities, different kinds of modalities and how they affected. So it's just more data, and it's comparing the gender. I mean, it's all interesting if you're in the medicine, right? If you're not in the medicine,
Yeah, and as I understand it, a big thing with acupuncture and those is that it's about balancing the body so the body can heal itself.
Correct.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely. What we promote homeostasis in order to not maximize the gradients, but to create proper gradients. Right. So now we're getting into the weather data. And so now we start to see the effects of different kinds of days upon the experiment. So you can see the different weather conditions for all 112 samples for phase 3. Scroll down to that pie chart. Most of the time you see is you have a clear day or a somewhat cloudy day. Occasional thunderstorms and quite a bit of rain. And so we would expect, during the thunderstorms to see, of course, greater changes in the electric field. And if I remember correctly, we see the most changes in the electric field during thunderstorms, during clear, cold days, and I think the overcast days.
Okay.
If I remember.
And does that change how you do the treatment, Ramon?
Theoretically, yes.
Like if
So
you've
that's
got
another.
a thunderstormy day, does it?
Yeah, so that's another way that we can attack. So according to Western science, there should be some kind of protocol for all these different kinds of treatments. That is not Chinese medicine. And so remember that I am treating these patients how Chinese medicine would view it, not how Western science wants us to do the work. They want to do it in a way that pretends that we need to ask, does Chinese medicine work? We already know Chinese medicine works. It's been around for 3,000 years for a reason. We had surgery before the West by far. We've had a number, even since I graduated, a number of scientific discoveries have been made that verified Chinese medicine. For example, the discovery of the mesentery organ, the discovery that your connective tissue is the largest organ of the body. It's even larger, of course, volumetrically than the skin. The discovery of the promovascular system as the channels, which we are going to redefine. Instead of calling it promovasculature, we're going to talk about charged sugar networks, which is going to be a pseudo-symbolic concept. But the bottom line is several discoveries just since I graduated have been made about Chinese medicine, because there's such a vigorous need to prove that it's correct. And not all of it's coming out of China, by the way. So now remember, people, all this work was done pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. So this time we were allies with China. Things were different conditions. Boy, a lot has changed since 2018, I tell you.
Yeah.
So this is showing the change in pain levels, the change in electric, the change in magnetism. You can see that the overcast conditions, weirdly, huge change in magnetic conditions. Look at the yellow spike in the overcast, and of course the thunderstorm. That makes sense. But in the overcast conditions, massive changes in the magnetic fields in people. Very unusual.
Now, what about man-made electricity, like the electric rainbow? That gentleman who wrote that book is saying that it's messing with our health, creating diabetes.
Again, until somebody does a study and verifies everything that he said in that, I've read through the paper. It's not convincing. It's compelling, but it's not convincing because it's not got a lot of actual citations. He has a lot of references. But until you put the citations, you see, I put the footnotes, and people can click the little bit.ly link and it takes them to the data table. You see, that's the difference between, when we follow the EPEMC standard. And so, by the way, folks, the gateway is up. You can go to www.epemcgateway.com, and it will take you. If you have any troubles with the S, just take the S off the HTTP, because I didn't buy a certificate for it. It's just a DNS forward to a Google site. But we have standards listed. If you want to volunteer, I have standards listed on the volunteer page. One of them is that we cite what we do. Why do we cite what we do? Because if we don't, then the mainstream will never accept us, and they will always have the upper hand to attack us. If we want to say, I'm not going to do peer review, which, remember, I submitted this to a peer-reviewed journal, an acupuncture journal, but they didn't understand it, and so they wouldn't publish it. In fact, I don't even think she read the whole thing, because I think she looked at the abstract and her eyes rolled at the back of her head, right? But this tied acupuncture to fundamental physics. To my knowledge, that hadn't been done before. I've not seen any studies of its like. And where Chinese medicine is done under its own terms, but is being measured with fundamental physics, classical electromagnetism. So we have to, if we're going to refuse to participate in the cult of the mainstream, we have to at least hold our own. So I put all the citations and I provide all the data, and people who are acupuncturists, if you want, you can repeat this experiment. It's all designed, and I can always explain to anybody who's listening. If you happen to be an acupuncturist and you happen to want to repeat phase 3's experiment and see what kind of results you get, you might get a better change in self-reported pain data. You might get a 63% result, in which case you're a better acupuncturist than I am. However, that's not the point of this. The point isn't to say, oh, well, we reduce pain, self-reported pain by half. That wasn't the point of this. I started with the assumption of, I know acupuncture does work, and that question has been answered for thousands of years. And China had its own version of peer review. And the question here was, is it magnetism? Is it electricity? How does the weather, how does the moon affect this stuff? And here we're looking and we can see, well, obviously thunderstorms had the greatest change in the electric field. That makes sense. They're walking to the clinic with all this extra charge. They lay on the table, you treat them, and when they're done, they have no electric charge left from the storm. You can see also on overcast days it was particularly high, and on rainy days, and on cloudy days. On clear days, I was wrong.
That would be your reflection.
On the clear days, not much change in the electric field. So this table is showing you that the weather absolutely is affecting your pain levels. That's not your imagination. And of course, in the West, they know this too. They've talked about this in arthritis for many decades, maybe centuries. People know this. But if they tell you that a cold is not related to the physical cold outside, then they are not really in possession of the facts. Your nervous system is absolutely affected by the weather. That's what this graph shows.
Okay.
Okay, we can continue.
So, let's say on an overcast day, would that mean you'd place the needles in different positions, or you'd leave them there longer?
No, it's just
or
on an overcast day, it's typically, not 100%, but typically a yin day. And on a yin day, you have to respect the body, the needs of the body on a yin day versus the needs of the body on a yang day. And it changes the breath type and everything. Okay. I want to be clear with people. People are sitting there thinking, well, what about repeatability? There is no true repeatability within medical studies. That is a lie and a lie and a lie. That you cannot needle two kids with the same vaccine and expect the same results. Both kids are eating different. There are different metabolic rates. Their hormones are different. Their moods are different that day. One might be in an abusive household. One might be in a household where they get a lollipop every day. They have different sets of conditions. It's all quantum. There is no repeatable situation. You can, however, repeat what you're doing, or in this case, there's a repetition of the philosophy behind the application of theory. It may be that one patient gets motor point treatment and another patient gets a fascia style or channel based treatment. However, the same standard of Chinese medicine pattern diagnosis is being applied the entire time. And that is the only way to do repetition of this kind of intervention therapy. Anything else is all lies. Placebo acupuncture, it's all lies. There is no placebo acupuncture. Placebo acupuncture is acupuncture. It's a very, very key point. And intervention therapies are not double-blind anyways. You know, you wouldn't want your heart surgeon to be blind, right? So you wouldn't want your acupuncture to be. They could of course puncture your organs. And this has been talked about in CAM research, that the inappropriateness of the double-blind placebo standard being applied to things that you really can't have. So this is looking at the yin versus yang moon situation. We see that the greatest changes in the electric field happen on yang moon days. By far, it's not even close. And that's what we would expect, because the yang moon would be reflecting the solar rays much stronger. That's what we would be expecting. Now, this is going to lead us down our path of pathological, the hypothesis of pathophysiology here pretty soon. So the only thing that is relevant to look here, I mean, the solar field data, I can't remember exactly what was special about this solar data, so I'll just skip it. Go to the moon data. So there's solar flares. I mean, you're looking. Keep going down. The solar flare data was interesting. You know, how many different solar flares happened, etc. Keep going. And you know, this is looking at the number of sunspots. So if you get into that, if anybody out there is a follower of the of Ben Davidson and the suspicious observers, this is your jam. This is what you're looking for. These are the droids you've been looking for, because this is the data coming off of spaceweather.com, correlated with people's pain levels as they came in. Okay. Looking again, proton density, just the sampling of proton densities, and looking at standard deviations mean. So skip all that. Keep going. Right. So now we get into the moving averages. This is where it gets pretty strange. The way to describe this is we're looking at changes in the electric field and the changes in the pain level. When they tended to move as a moving average together, seemed to correlate to specific times of the moon. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if the electric field changed and the pain level changed, the moving average from day to day seemed to move towards each other, or in some cases far away from each other, depending on the shift in the moon phase.
Okay.
Which would indicate again of proton densities.
So you could have more people coming in depending on the moon change, with pain than not. Yeah, the pain more acute than at other changes.
Now the only problem is verifying that this was introduced. So here's the table that you really want to see, and unfortunately, it is sideways here, but you can see that when we had a change into like waxing, the graphs would far go apart from each other, or if they were waning. And this cycle of the waxing and the waning tended to show a separation of the moving averages, whereas the full and new moons, the moving averages would approach each other. And now, if that is not statistically convincing, I don't really know what to say. I mean, maybe it is a huge coincidence, and we have to do in a full 12 months of cycle. Maybe it's different in the winter than it is in the summer, and in the fall and spring, etc. However, this experiment went on for a couple months, this phase, and again, it's moving averages, so it's not exactly a real trend, but it is, to me, statistically interesting when you see that kind of behavior in the graph. That's my opinion, but I'm not a statistician. So continue. I think we're just about done with this paper. Yeah. So I provide again more criticisms of the chart, and here I talk about the pain and the controls and the maxes, etc. It's just a big data fest. Again, we expect that the mainstream is not going to. Not only are they not going to want to accept acupuncture, but they're not going to want to accept electricity for some odd reason. So we have to overwhelm with the data. But of course, that opens you up to more attack too, because there's always problem with data. There's always the assumptions that are made. So I provide all those criticisms, and then I list the conclusions. So that's the first paper. That's the three phases. Here I just go into talking about electric fields and how they all work. This is to inform the Remember, this paper was geared for an acupuncture journal, not for the Journal of American Medicine, but for an acupuncture medicine. And then here I compare the difference between qi and charge. So according to Chinese medicine, what the properties of qi are, and we see there is a lot of similarity between qi and charge. It's almost uncanny. There are some things between the two that are different, and it has led for people to postulate that qi is a different form of charge, or that it's ether and that ether is not charge. And then here in the Appendix B, I explain how, in my opinion, this is working. So you have the solar wind, of course, and then the solar wind's interacting with the Earth. The Earth is allowing certain amounts of the charges and cosmic rays to come through. These are getting lodged into the neurons, and because now the proton it's interfering with the ion channels that are actually pumping up and down the dendrites. And it's very easy for these to enter. Now, if you are aware of chi, if you are a person who is sensitive to chi, you can absolutely feel these storms coming well before their arrival. Well before their arrival. You can feel the changes well ahead. And you also feel the effects of the solar wind right on time. Right? So when the coronal mass ejection just came in, 2 weeks ago, I could feel it at the moment it was reaching its peak. And then I went and meditated. But I didn't start treating the migraines and the other conditions where people were complaining about it for 2 days. Right? The next day, people were having migraines. I treated maybe 4 migraine cases the following day, and then a bunch of allergy treatments on the Thursday following. But on that Tuesday, right, the CME started arriving, late Sunday, but mostly Monday, and then peaked in power on the Tuesday, and I started feeling that, and I could feel it in the eyes. There was a burning sensation in the eyes. I used a specific oil, which released the yin energy, and then I laid and meditated under the foil and got rid of these charges, and then I went on about my business. I felt fully recharged.
What do you mean meditated under the foil? What is that?
We use a space blanket, an emergency. It's a metal foil blanket to reflect the body. You see, because chi prefers to be at 98.6 degrees, even though you don't. You prefer to be at whatever, 72 or 71, whatever your preference is. Right. But chi, of course, prefers to be at 98.6 degrees.
I see. So what do? You put yourself in an environment that is completely free of all electric charges?
I wish. I don't own a isolation chamber. That would be great. That'd be fantastic. Okay. I don't have that. No, I use my charge distributive networks. So that brings us to here's what happened. So I published the paper onto ResearchGate. I tried to get it into a Journal of Acupuncture. They clearly didn't understand it. So that's fine. I knew it was going to be heavy for them. And then I went on about my business, and across my desk came a couple of very interesting papers. Both were written by electrical engineers who also happened to be acupuncturists. The first one was out of Taiwan, and he presented a paper about the fractal wave theory of channels. And I thought that was really fascinating. He had some wide designs, and we're gonna do those in it's the other paper, the other tab. And then the other paper presented a series of block diagrams. And what these did was they excited my desire to create a fractal model using a circuit design, because it had not been done, like an analog circuit design. It clearly has to be analog, even though we're probably going to have to model it on a realistic level when we talk about the computing power that would be necessary, because analog circuits affect each other. If you change the resistance in this area of the circuit over here, it's going to affect the entire resistance of the entire circuit. So, realistically, for computing simulation, we might have to digitize the circuits. But realistically, what we're talking about is a form of analog circuit that is itself a fractal, where the point is acting as the circuit, and also the entire channel is acting also by that same design. And the constraint for the design for a charge distributive network, aside from being fractal, was that it, of course, had to flow typically in one direction, but had to allow both Eastern and Western pathophysiologies to occur, and an explanation for this proton and ion overload, cosmic ray overload of the circuit. Right? So occasionally the load side, the right side of the circuit, would need to be capable of generating a backflow across the transformer. So that's very key. Now it's a symbolic circuit in that we don't have all of the values that we need at this moment. What we know is that, typically speaking, you don't get an infection going up the wrong direction of your channels, typically. which thank God, right? If you got a scratch on your fingernail and you got gangrene in your arm, that would be a bad situation. So you typically need the circuits of your body to flow in one direction. However, it can go the other way. A classic example is diabetic wounds. So these wounds open up and you get a very bad signal propagating throughout the body, and it can become septic. Then there are other examples. I've actually treated a woman whose son he received an accidental death touch on the soccer field. So he got their whole high school team got in a big fight with the other high school team, and a wild punch was thrown. He was hit in the stomach 9, which is the vagus nerve, and 2 weeks later he died of internal carotid disintegration syndrome. Wow. And that is, in the West, that's an incurable condition. I have also treated people and failed at saving 2 different people from basically their feet were rotting off. One of the cases was actually
how does that happen?
Caused by someone's bad acupuncture, and so he came to me to get it fixed. But of course, as soon as I started getting the channels to flow in the right direction, he went back to work and he started wearing construction boots, and he got it infected again, and he ended up losing the legs. And it was caused by bad acupuncture performed by somebody who thought they were doing really good classical acupuncture, but actually what they did was they reversed the channels. So this is another classic case, if people want to remember. There was a child in Japan who played Sony PlayStation 2 for so long, for so many days in a row, that he developed the jackhammer was called the shaken hand syndrome. And it was because the controllers vibrated. And playing it for 20 plus hours a day. And vibrational energy is a problem in the channels. You can get vibrational energy in the channels. Recently, I discovered when I box, when I hit the heavy bag, I have to double wrap. If I don't double wrap, even if I hit lighter, the single wrap allows too much vibration through to the knuckles, and I can feel it go up the arm. So these channels do need to flow in a singular direction. And there are compounds that are going to reverse that. I'm not going to blame coffee, but energy drinks for sure will reverse the flow of these channels. All right, so hit the read full text. Let's get into it.
All right.
Especially some of them energy drinks that come down the market now.
I don't. I did it.
They're full on high carb.
They're not good for the heart. That's the thing that I can definitely say about them.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead and we'll skip the abstract and all that. So this is out of the guy's paper, and he's just describing. What is he describing here? The input impedance in the diagram. And this comes off of a dog. So he's talking about the fractal wave theory. Continue down, it's fine. This is just me citing the original paper that I'm pulling all this information from. So I always do that if I'm bringing his knowledge into the paper, so that's why it's all in italics and cited. And there's his Y circuit diagrams. The engineers in the audience will recognize the Y circuits. And so then I go into meridian theory and the entire purpose of how a circuit in Chinese medicine actually works, in which ways that it helps his theory, and which ways it doesn't help his theory, because there are problems with the Chang model. Like I say, go back up there. I say it may prove more reliable and foundational as pragmatic and difficult in demonstration without the production of diagnostic. Some kind of diagnostic system that helps you to define, are you talking about normal physiology or pathophysiology? And you have to include both biological and acupuncture kind of medicine.
Okay.
Right? Whatever this circuit needs to work, regardless if you're talking about pumping fluids through acupressure or massage, or if you're doing PT and functional kinesiology. it needs to be able to explain the positive circulation and also the negative flow of the pathophysiology.
Okay.
That's the point here that I'm making.
All right.
So keep on.
Okay.
Then he goes just talking about chaotic wave theory. So we can just continue. If people want to read it, feel free. It gets a little heavy.
Yeah, I see that.
Especially if you're not versed in. So there it is. So there's my solution circuit. Now you'll note that theoretically we have a short across the transformer. However, bear in mind that the body is the very high resistance, theoretically, right? So comparative to, say, a copper wire.
Mm-hmm.
The point of the Zener diode here is to act as the barrier going across. But then there's a certain kind of storage of current, and that's what the inductor. So the inductor would act. The inductor here that crosses the transformer. The inductor here would store the current, meaning that if I breathe and I get my chi going, and then I stop that kind of breathing and I go back about my normal business, I will feel my body buzz for a certain period of time afterwards. Mm-hmm. So there's a storage of current in those channels. That's what that means. Mm-hmm. What that current storage is, we don't know. Now, if you see values in the circuit, like the 40 millivolts and the 70 ohms, and the 833 microhertz, those are from actual biological experiments that have been done, and those are cited in the paper. The goal is to get your source in from the central nervous system should be overall greater than your source out on your peripheral nervous system. However, occasionally it could go the other way. For example, pain. Pain would be the classic example. Pressure signal would be another. So we need to be able to account for that. And then there's just other things in here, different kinds of storage. Essence, figuring out how the storage of essence, I can't remember how that number, where that came from. It probably comes from the kidney. We don't know exactly what essence is. It may be that it's all hormonal. And it may be that it's the dorsal ganglia coming out of the nerves interacting with the kidneys. We just don't have enough information. Mm. Now remember, this is a semi-symbolic circuit. Mm. However, it's the first one in the world. The point of the transformer is that these points and channels transform the pathophysiology into a positive physiology. Classically, we would talk about respiration, we would talk about metabolism, we would talk about the elimination of waste in the body, and the overall ability of the body to remove negativity on the out, and it should not go back, right? It's a very bad thing if urea reverses direction and goes back into the body, because urea is a poison. And so this circuit, the goal is to make it work on a macro level or a micro level, to work for the entire stomach channel or just the stomach 36 point. And then I go into a lot of the assumptions made and the various meanings. And this isn't even to say that this is a perfect diagram, right? I guarantee you it's not, because it's a first version of something that we then need to run circuit simulation, and then this should look familiar. Mm-hmm. So here, just about in the previous, in the 3 trials, there seemed to be an indication that protons and positive ions, or we could just say cosmic rays in general, were coming in and causing damage to the flow. In that paper, the focus was on nerves, because we're talking electric fields. Mm-hmm. However, technically speaking, these charge distributive networks may not be nerves. They might be fascia channels, they might be lymphatic channels, they might be capillary beds, they could be the Purkinje fibers. So recently, my friend died from alpha-gal. He was unable to be revived with an EpiPen. The question is, why would that happen? Why would he be incapable? Well, if you guys will remember, that week we had a coronal mass ejection. So as his heart was probably overloaded with protons and ions, there's a chance that his Purkinje fibers could not react to the epinephrine. You get what I'm going with this?
Mm-hmm.
So this would explain why the pericardium 9 point at the end of the finger, if you guys stick up, give the bird, the tender point at the end of your middle finger is pericardium 9. And on the left side, if somebody collapses and they're near to death like that, don't bother with pericardium 6. Don't bother with hardly any of the other angina points that are specific for angina, and they come from a society that did not have machines to restart the heart, defibrillators. They had to figure out a way to revive the person. There are 2 extremely good revival points, and that's one of them. And you would theoretically, you would get as thick a needle as you could, thumbtack or something like that. You would plug it in there. Now, why would that work? If it isn't moving charge, I would like to know. And that's my theory about what happened to my friend Bruce.
So you're saying sticking a needle in a person's middle finger could reactivate their heart?
It would clear the blockage that is keeping their heart, their Purkinje fibers, from firing correctly. The heart protector channel, that is its job. It removes particularly summer-related damage. The enemy of the heart protector channel is summer damp, and summer damp is associated with kind of a late spring, early summer, and then also the time after the summer fire when it gets very humid out. We call the dog days of summer. Those are the times when people have a lot of collapse. A few years ago, there was a high school-aged kid, and that's exactly when he died. He was a football, basketball star here, and it was a summer camp. It was either July or August, and I think he was just turning 18, and he killed over, dead before he hit the floor. So, yin and yang collapse are serious conditions. I've used the revival points in actual emergency situations. I've come across car wrecks, people who've fallen downstairs and banged their head, and I've used them to great effect to revive them and get them out of shock. But that one, I have not had a chance to use it yet, and it's very rare that people will get to know that point. Mostly people get to use DO 26 or P6, P8, those kinds of points. But in that one, it actually says in the text that you jam the needle into the tip of the finger. It's a very painful point to do, but it has an effect for some reason.
And that's why it would have an effect.
That's my theory.
So would it matter which hand you did that on? Would it matter which hand you did it on, Ramon?
Well, theoretically, in Bruce's case, because he had cardiac arrest due to anaphylaxis, then you would have to use the left one. Okay, if the person's having, so I once saw someone have tonic-clonic seizures due to an emotional, like a fight with their own mother, and they were spasming and seizuring from the anger, then you would use the right one, because the right one would go to the emotional heart on the right side. If they went from tonic-clonic seizures into yang collapse. And there's a difference between yang and yin collapse. We won't bother. If you see someone passing out, just assume it's yin collapse and work from there, because yin collapse is worse than yang collapse. Yang collapse is more common. Some years ago, I have a patient. She's still a patient. She was at the exercise facility, and a woman was doing the rope exercises, and she fell from the rope. She had a yang collapse. She was dead by the time she hit the floor. Never revived her. More recently, a man who was a kung fu master down in Tennessee, he was warming up to give a private lesson to a cardiovascular surgeon, and even the cardiovascular surgeon couldn't save him. And the kung fu master died right there. That's yang collapse. But yin collapse is also possible. It's usually associated with, say, summer damp or something like that. Environmental conditions.
That's crazy. Now, you remember that injury I told you I had?
in a yin collapse, you become very sticky and oily, and you lose a lot of fluids. What were you going to ask?
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, like shock.
I was just going to ask you about that injury I seem to have. Well, I was pitching and I stopped throwing because I've got numbness in my thumb and my first two fingers. It's like it's not a pins and needles feeling. It's more like it's like numb.
Yeah, it's called paresthesias. Well, it depends on the cause. I want to mention to Unbroken. I just opened this to see. You're not supposed to ingest apricot seeds unless you're cooking them. Just to make sure that that's clear to everyone. So they are poisonous.
Uh-huh. All right.
Yeah, because they got high. What's the name? I can't think. The Germans used it when they wanted to kill themselves.
But that's why it says.
Yes. What's the chemical? Germans used to use it. They had the little pills of it during the war.
Cyanide.
Fine. That's it.
Broken. Yes, we were talking Chinese medicine, but we were talking about the electromagnetism, electric fields. That's where we got into the discussion. So from there, I mean that's pretty much the two papers, how one led to the other. The charge distributive network theory. From there, we have a device that we're wanting to build. We're going to raise money using the Ulium coin that Aaron has devised. It's a cryptocurrency for raising research money, and we'll use the Ulium coin to get our prototype going. And eventually, the goal is to create a circuit that is a device that enables us to push energy fields through the person, and whether they're a bully, a psychopath, depressed, having trouble getting pregnant, no matter what, that we push energy through the person and actually remove the issues that they're having associated with having too much protons and positive ions. And now we can also understand why negative ions, particularly around oceans and waterfalls, are so good for us. I've heard a lot of interesting explanations for that. But it's interesting also in feng shui, you're not supposed to live near a waterfall. Well, if it's so good for you, it's such a calming thing, why wouldn't you live there? Because over time, that many negative ions will drain you as well. Because the negative ions are pulling away the positive ions. Now, when you have too many positive ions, that's a good thing. So this is why it's also good to ground your feet from time to time. But it's not good to constantly walk around in bare feet, which is something that a lot of hippies believe, and then they don't know why they have arthritis.
Now, what about that thing that supposedly Tesla invented? It's called a purple plate. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I hadn't heard of that one. I do have his patent book if we want to look in it.
He's got the Tesla purple plate. It's supposed to be you put your feet on it, and it's supposed to heal your ails. I don't know. I don't know that much about it, but I did see one on Amazon, and I was wondering, if you've run across it. Let me see if I can find it.
Well, I've got the patent book here.
Okay.
I'd like to take questions.
Okay. You want me to go to the live stream then?
Oh well, I'm looking at the.
Okay. Okay.
I'm looking at the stream there, but
Okay.
no, I meant your guys' questions to start with, and then if anybody wants to ask some specific questions like health questions, I can't give medical advice to non-patients. However, I can try to direct people to competent knowledge and competent safe places.
Well, just go ahead and take it from Ramon, or from I forgot the right plate. From Andy or the chat room. I'm okay right now. There it is, right there.
We'll have a look at the chat.
Chris, yes, we are talking Chinese medicine, but bear in mind that the charge distributive network was designed in mind with also in keeping with pathophysiology of biomedicine. So the explanation that sometimes diseases do spread against the direction that they're not supposed to.
Positive energy purple plate. It made me think of it when you said a negative ion thing. But
I'm
this
just wondering if that's an actual Tesla invention.
And it says it is. It says Tesla positive energy purple plate. I don't know. I don't know that much about it. But
Chris, can you describe the migratory inflammation? In particular, like what kind and where it came from? Because everything in Chinese medicine is going to be due to the context. It's very important to get the etiology correct. I'm not seeing anything specifically about. It's the problem with
because really we have really remind like we have the Chinese medicine side, but really it's about how the electricity or electric conductiveness of the body affects the day-to-day operation of one.
Correct. Well, and
your speciality, of course, is the Chinese medicine.
The journey here was, that I started with the scalar magnetic wave theory, and in that paper I talked about the rotation of electrons through the benzene rings within your DNA, and then the way everything's coiled up, and the way that circulation and that coiling generates a magnetic field, and that magnetic field generates a new electric field, and pretty soon we have a description for why DNA should look like an X or a Y, and when it doesn't look like an X and a Y, what's really going on? It has to do with a lack of charge. Now, here's an interesting thing. There is a belief and an observation, and here you're seeing that there's actual MRI data that supports this. When people are full of charge, they look younger, and they look more healthy, like more muscular, even though they haven't done any exercise. And now we have a theory as to why. Their channels are flush. Of course, they haven't drank necessarily more water suddenly. They feel stronger because they've been hiking or doing qigong or doing yoga, despite they should be tired. And now we have a reason, a physiological reason as to why that would happen. Okay, so Chris wrote here, moves around to different joints related to diabetes. Sugar seems like the only guaranteed trigger. Carbs, same difference. Okay, so when we talk about migratory inflammation, we're talking about the same description of wind that is relevant to the discussion. In the Chinese medicine, they say that wind is the carrier of 10,000 diseases. Now, how could wind do that? The wind penetrates the channels. Now, the description of wind inside of the body then becomes an electrical description, such as in seizures. We see epileptic storms, and we see electricity moving throughout the body. So when you have a condition of B-tong means obstructive pain, and it's caused by wind, cold, or damp. Then when you talk about moving around to different joints, what you're really talking about is, again, there's an energy that is not natural to the body, which is not escaping the body and is moving around the different nerve bundles of the body and tends to reside within the fascia layers, which in our medicine is called the Xiaoyang division. And it doesn't want to escape. The actual escape, believe it or not, is out of the knuckles. And I didn't believe that when I went to school, but then one day I was meditating and I felt wind, physical wind, blow out of my knuckle, between the knuckles technically. So the 8 points between your knuckles on your hand are called the 8 evils, and on the feet are called the 8 winds. And these are places I needle to get rid of inflammation, to bring about circulation, to get rid of all sorts of diseases. I have a patient right now, he gets eruptions in his feet. They literally blister up out of nowhere. And so we're trying to evacuate whatever chemical poison that is there, because the poison is carried to the capillary beds at the ends, and that's where it's transformed. As far as diabetes goes, it's just another form of the body creating its own poison. So it's still due. It's just instead of, you consumed pesticides or something, which you could have, this poison is generated by the liver and the spleen. Is it possible to dissolve calcium deposits at the hip bone? Yes and no. If the calcium deposit is totally ossified and is part of the bone, then external medicines won't do it. Only if you meditate and only if you activate the signal that creates apoptosis, well, then the macrophages go and dissolve. But the chances are you'll create just better scarification. And then what about kidney stones? There are herbs for kidney stones. However, the kidney stones need to be small for you to really get rid of them that way. But there is a formula for a kidney stone. Gotu kola, that's an herb, I believe. It's not a Chinese herb. I've seen people use it, but the question is, what is its effectiveness? I would check the PubMed for that. But the Chinese formula is very effective. However, it's much better if you take it before you have full-on stones. If you have small stones, what's called sandy Lin syndrome. Lin means difficult urination. If you have sandy Lin syndrome, then you can more easily dissolve that and flush the kidneys. However, when you get to the point where the kidneys are making stones so big that it's filling up the entire medulla, you have to have surgery. They have to remove it. There's just no way to dissolve the stones that way.
Hey, you guys go ahead and carry on. Speaking of going to the bathroom, I have to go.
Yeah, ask more questions, guys. Ask health questions. This is your time. This is your it's free time. Because in clinic you'd be paying me. So this is good to get some questions out. Andy, do you have any questions?
Well, that was the whole thing when you spoke to me the other week, and that was about, like you've said, about the number of people that you come across in recent times anyway, that have, all of a sudden they're going along and just bang, fall over, and now they've got too much. You don't need a lot of extra charge for your heart to fail. And I thought, gee, this would be a good one to talk about, because there's been a lot of, things going on, especially the last 18 months. And where does this all lead? That was what my thing was.
I have a funny story. So this past Saturday, I took my kids to the gun show. And I don't mean my biceps. I took them to Olika Temple. And when we showed up, somebody had shot themselves in the hand. And I mean, I would be embarrassed to be the vendor who had a loaded firearm at the gun show. But anyways, we went to the comic book store, then came back. And so then we're walking around, and I'm enjoying the different vendors and everything. And came across a guy, and he was selling these rings and various jewelries, and it just said frequency. And I said, "What frequency are you talking about?" And then he said, 7.83. I said, "Oh, these are Schumann resonance rings and bracelets." And he described the process, and then we did some testing, and there were definite changes in balance. I teach Tai Chi, so I have a very good one-legged stance balance. And there was definite changes, and it reminded me of the fact that right now our Schumann resonance on this planet is way out of control. And with this climate change that's happening, people are absolutely more susceptible now to damage from the environment, from the changes in the solar system electric circuit, from changes in the planetary electric circuit, the magnetosphere, the reduction of the magnetosphere, the reduction of the strength of the ozone. All of these things are enabling more and more of these protons to get in. People are getting more angry. People are getting more susceptible. And yes, they're getting in car wrecks they don't mean to have. They're getting in arguments that they wouldn't normally have. They're having disagreements. There seems to be a disproportionate effect because these are all yin conditions, and protons may be called positive charge. This is all Benjamin Franklin's fault. Protons are yin. They're big, like eggs are, right? They're large, and they don't move as quickly as the electrons. And they seem to be affecting women disproportionately. There has been an uptick of lots of argument between couples, and physical damage happening to women, from what I've noticed. Thyropause is through the roof. Andropause is becoming more common. 100% of women are going to go through menopause. A lot of men are also going to go now through what I call manopause, because they're ingesting too many estrogens in their food. We joke about it being soy, but it's actually happening in the water supply and everything. Testosterone signals are much lower in men than they were in the late 80s. And that's measured through handshake strength. So there are definite changes that are happening, and these changes are having an effect on people's mind and spirit and body. That's why it's very important that they go out and actually encounter nature and get resets through nature. And I go to the Daniel Boone ley line, and from the Daniel Boone ley line, then I feel the primal energy that goes back all the way to the dinosaurs. I feel the energy matrix laid down when Saturn laid down that geological matrix. So that's what I do. And I swim in the waters of those sandstone waterfalls. And the minerals help. The Schumann resonance rings, and I got a coin from him too, also has the same general effect. So I would definitely recommend people look. I think that the Facebook page for the guy's what he was selling was WTFREQ, like what the freak, and his name was Randy Hallman.
What do you do in the wintertime?
I'm sorry?
What do you do in the wintertime?
You mean about the positive charges?
Going back to nature. I mean, how can you get into nature?
I go out. I still go out. I wear 3 layers.
Oh, okay.
And I take a change of dry clothes for afterwards, because I sweat like a beast when I'm out there. But I'll wear a fleece. I'll wear a thermal. Then I'll wear a fleece. Then I'll wear a hoodie. And then I'll wear a coat.
Okay. Now
I generate a huge sweat, because the sweat carries these negative charges, or I'm sorry, negative energies, positive charges out of the body.
Yes.
And we can all thank Benjamin Franklin for just arbitrarily deciding which one should be positive, which one should be negative.
Yeah.
All right. So a book called Mind Training by Jin Pa. And no, I'm not particularly at a Mopai book. Don't train in Mopai if it is. What site is the recipe for the kidney stone? You can look, in general, you can do a search for Chinese herbal medicine kidney stone formula, and you can read all about it. But folks, you really need to go to a qualified herbal medical practitioner. I can do it for you. I can prescribe it to anywhere in the country from Kentucky. So you can work with me if you like, or you can find a local herbal apothecary. I can get you raw herbs from a Louisville-based apothecary. But you really need to work with a qualified, because your formula should reflect your pattern. And you are not trained in pattern diagnosis. You are taught by society to go with disease diagnosis. And there's a Chinese saying, 1,000 patterns, 1 disease, 1,000 diseases, same pattern. That means that 2 people have a heart attack, they look completely different. And 2 people with the same pattern, one has the heart attack and one gets cancer or lives to a ripe old age. So you need to understand how a macro systems type of differential diagnosis works, rather than a deductive reasoning type of differential diagnosis, which gets down to the nitty. It goes way down to the small proteins and how they're working, and this is working, and that's great if you hit upon the right information. But if you miss it by a little bit, then you can really hurt the person quite a bit, and that's the danger of biomedicine.
What do you know about HISOP?
Nothing particular. I mean, Chinese medicine is not really great at supplements.
Okay.
There are a lot of different supplements. There is, in the acupuncture desk reference, there is a supplement or Western herb kind of treatment table. Mm-hmm. But Western herbalism is practiced very different than Chinese herbalism.
I see.
Crucial to improve general health. Yes. No, I totally agree with that. There's a concept in Chinese medicine called yang sheng, means nourishing life. And sometimes nourishing life means eat the donut, and sometimes it means absolutely do not eat that donut, or it could actually kill you. So that's a very difficult thing about this kind of science, because it is a quantum-based science. It is completely and wholly dependent upon the changes, and that means, yes, the sun, the moon, the stars even. I've ever read Gahong's To Live as Long as Heaven and Earth. No, I don't read a lot of Gahong. I can't remember what text I had read of Gahong's, but it was back in acupuncture school. I tend to more read these days. Of course, I'm reading more to do with the research that I do in the cosmology. And then I spent a long time reading the different Taoist texts, alchemical texts, the Neijing too. I have a very excellent Taoist canon as far as being translated into English. The thing about the Tao is, I want to clear this up. First of all, there's a big hubbub about. By the way, Greg, I couldn't find anything about a purple plate in this patent,
Okay.
Nikola Tesla patent book. I'm just saying.
Okay.
There's a whole lot that has been said about Taoism. I fall in the camp that you are a Taoist if you seek Tao. Okay, now to seek Tao does not mean necessarily you seek the Tao, or you might seek the Tao but never achieve Tao, because Tao is both a noun and a verb. Now there are other people that believe out there that Dao Jia means you are a monk or nun practicing in the culture Dao Jia, and so you are immersed in that space. What I call is you get the taste of it. And if you are going to seriously study Taoism or Chinese medicine, you want to get the taste of it. The same as with Kung Fu. If you approach Kung Fu and it's always Bruce Lee to you, you will never ever have the gong. And that's just the facts. And then if you don't have the gong, you won't enter Jianghu, and you won't meet the dragons along the way. But once you have the gong, you meet dragons everywhere you go. And you meet them in boxing places, and you meet them in mixed martial arts places, and when you meet them, you know them. And it's like you know them inside of yourself. Just like when I met Randy at the gun show, right? I started transforming. He actually got some plum pit chi, as he recalled a health story, and his throat got painful, etc. So when you have the gong, then you meet the dragons everywhere they are. But if you never have the flavor of it, then you're always an outsider. This is the meaning behind those wuxia films where some of the warriors can fly and the other ones are just normal idiots who are swinging swords. It's all metaphor. And so when you really want to understand Taoism, the question is, have you ever tasted the flavor of the Tao, the canon of the Tao, the culture of the Tao, and been within the Tao? If you just read the Tao Te Ching, or what most people say Tao Te Ching, if you just read it like once or twice, or you just read The Art of War once or twice, that isn't it. Even if you read the Tao of Pu 100,000 times, you wouldn't get it, because the Tao of Pu is not Tao Jiao. Period. It didn't come out of that culture. Now you might read the Desiderata or the Book of Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas, and get kind of close to the flavor. But to really understand the flavor, you have to get in there. Now, once you get in there, you're going to find the world is full of just the same number of quacks and charlatans and idiots. One of the doctors, and I can't remember what his name was at the moment, but his belief was that you needed to sleep with like 7 or 10 virgins a night. Okay, he had a great life, but he didn't make it to 120. And then everybody has pretended for the last, I don't know, 500 to 1,000 years that you need to do complex yoga operations in order to achieve profound longevity. However, when we look at the lifespan of Louis Ming, we look at the lifespan of the 256-year-old man, Li Chongyin, they didn't practice that kind of way. And Li Chongyin was just a cloud walker. He would collect herbs. He had many wives. He outlived them all. And he was a deadbeat dad. He had no responsibilities in the world. He probably drank, but not overly much so. And the only form of Qigong that he practiced, or they told us that he practiced, was the 8 brocades, which is a very simple series of systems. So when you see a book like, Taoist Yoga, or you read the complex Taoist operations in the Neijing 2, always take them with a grain of salt, because when you start interfering with your charge distributive networks, with your mind and with your breath practices without guidance, and you alter the belong to God and to the way your body was automatically programmed. That might be necessary if your program has gone bad. If you have diabetes, or if you have addiction, or you have aches all the time, or bad dreams, then maybe you want to take control and alchemize yourself and totally change your programs. It may be necessary. But if you take that control, then now you are responsible for that control from then on out. Just as Jesus' disciples were never going to be able to do the same. So that's a very important thing about those kinds of studies. Let's see here. Electrolyte balance is important. Absolutely. Of course. Yeah. So, electrolytes are ions, and your charge distributor networks will not work correctly if you do not have a proper flow of ions. Oh, heavy, some crinkling there. Okay, what are you eating? A potato chip?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
How could you hear it? Now you can hear it because I got my mic on.
Oh.
Well, I heard it.
Oh, we could hear it.
Okay.
Sorry.
If you say so. So when you have the minerals, the ions, if you're not getting enough of one, particularly like magnesium would be a great example, you can do a small test. Only, follow Western scientific method. Only change one mineral at a time. And if you change those and you either generate cramping or you create like fatigue or something, then you've gone too far. So be very careful about changing. But yes, check your mineral levels all the time. Of course, you go to the doctor and have your electrolytes tested. Red Dragon, yes, you're the dragon.
12 cell salts.
Have I studied Satori?
Yeah,
Yes.
That comes back to two, when you're talking about those minerals and that, Ramon, that comes back to two, a lot of the way our foods and that are grown now. We can make stuff look pretty and all that, but
yes,
it comes back to the soils.
And that's a huge issue.
Like that.
But it comes up in the Greg. We gotta get together soon to do the Spacers program and bring on. That's going to be a huge. It may actually need to be a 2 or 3 parter. But one of the things that I go over in there is how important the soils are, because we really have not appreciated that in our society. Study story, yes. Diagnosis through reading the eye pupil, absolutely, yes. The eyes. In fact, when you fill out your paperwork, I'm diagnosing what your handwriting looks like, the color on your face, the timbre of your voice. If there's a subtle vibration to your presentation, are you soft-spoken? Do you giggle in the way that indicates a problem with the fire element? Like, is there an inappropriate voice or what's called shun? It's not just about the color of the tongue. It's the shape of the tongue. It's the way the tongue vibrates. Everything you do or don't do is actually diagnosable, including, of course, the eyes, especially the eyes. What's replacing metal and tooth using resin? How often? You mean you've gotten fillings? Yeah, get the metals out of your fillings. And how often? You'll have to speak to your dentist about that. I'm not an expert in Chinese medicine. Don't rely on Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine is not known for dentistry. Happy to be
Chinese people didn't get bad teeth.
Well, in the old days it didn't, but then the civilization changed all that.
Yeah.
Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism by Changyam Trungpa, absolutely. Wasn't Zeus a leprechaun? Gospel of Thomas, edition published by Shambhala. You could get the Nag Hammadi or the one in the Gnostic Bible. There's also for free on the internet. Let's see here. Okay, I think that catches up on the questions that were directed towards us. I'd like to know if anybody else had any specific questions. We are able to get a little deeper but my phone's going to start to run out of charge here.
Just look at the 12 cell salts. That's important for our blood.
I'm sorry, were you talking to me?
I was just making a comment about the 12 cell salts.
Can you speak more about that, please?
Well, I have a video on it. Actually, it's on my Aquarius video. It's at the end. Basically the person who wrote the book, it was a doctor something or other, came the turn of the century, said it's important that you don't lack any of the 12 basic cell salts that we have in our body. And actually, each person, it corresponds with the astrology. You're going to have to look up. I'll attach it to this video. Watch my Aquarius video, and right at the end, I do a piece on it, and it's pretty important. I sent them to Ted, and I sent a bottle to Andy, and I take them myself. None of us have been sick since we started. They're sublingual. You put them under your tongue. You can't get an overdose. You just pee out anything in excess. But I will attach the information to this video.
I'll be glad to do a so-called herb tasting. There's an ancient tradition of taking supplements and herbs and different things and then noting the effects on the body. I'll be glad to do that and let you know energetically the effects.
That'd be good.
But it sounds very
great.
interesting. I'm interested in it.
Yep.
Again, supplementation works like this in Chinese medicine. The more refined a substance is, the more side effects it has. So when you have the indigo plant, it is antimicrobial. When you refine it to the indigo powder, it becomes downright antiviral. And yes, I just said that. So if people are paying attention, if you refine the indigo plant down to the indigo powder, then you add the indigo powder. It is an antiretroviral. It is an acyclovir in herbs. I hope that was clear enough. Okay, that is not how I treat the koof, as people have been calling it. But it is a one way you can get an antiretroviral in the body. Now, the downside is the refined indigo plant is colder and harsher to the chi than the indigo plant as a whole. And this is why in Ayurveda, they would use the entire herb instead of the parts. See, in Chinese medicine, you use the part. You use the rhizome, or you use the cortex, or you use the leaf or the flower. But in Ayurveda, they use the entire thing to try and get the entire intelligence of the entire plant. What they're really doing is increasing the level of chemical cocktail that they're getting, and there's more balance. And so there's not as much of a harsh and potent effect. It's not as pointy in that way, but it also has a much more smooth overall effect. Unless, of course, it's a poisonous plant like rhubarb, in which case you wouldn't want to do that. You would want to only take the rhubarb root. How someone deal with having no teeth and taking
rhubarb.
And you see
Rhubarb and apple.
Again, you're going to need to speak with your dentist about that. I mean, there are herbs that you can chew on, and there are herbs that you can rinse with, but honestly, traditional dentistry of the ancient days just doesn't compare with modern dentistry. At the same time, I know that the modern dentistry has a lot of toxins and poisons, but if you want your mouth to look a certain way and to taste a certain way and to last, then you really need to follow the recommendations of the dentist. It's just not something that Chinese medicine is very good at talking about. That's the one area we keep hitting on dentistry here. But in general, that's not an area that. So dentistry and dermatology, these are two things I say don't mess around with. Now, I tried using alchemy to defeat a root canal, and I made it a whole month, but eventually I needed the root canal. Now, when I got the root canal, they messed it up, and I could feel that they had implanted the root canal too deep. And then my dentist commented on it, and I went back, and the owner of the place had to do it herself. And she said, you know what? They did do this wrong. And she said, how could you feel that? I said, well, because I do chi. So I could feel where they had put it. They put it in too deep, and I could feel that the entire time, whatever the last 2 months since they did it. But the point is that even with using alchemy and absorbing plasma energy at a campfire into the area and defeating the negative energy, in the end, I had to get the root canal. So there are some things that you don't fight. And then there's other things you absolutely can fight. And knowing the difference between those, it's sort of the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Sometimes knowledge beats wisdom, sometimes wisdom beats knowledge. Any subject on Ayurveda? There's a documentary called Ayurveda, The Science of Life. And you can see from that documentary that it is a very similar medicine tradition and a very reliable tradition. However, a lot of the Ayurveda supplements that come out of India have heavy metals. Just be aware that there is a tradition of use of heavy metals. And in the documentary, they even show a man, he feeds his wife a precious gemstone that has been refined. But you see, he knew the process for refining it. There's no guarantee the supplement company making Ayurvedic herbs out of India knows that secret process, and that was handed down father to son. So you're taking your life into your own hands. And it's the same thing when you ingest any kind of toxic substance, refined substance from the internet, like some Ormus or whatever. You don't know what its effect is going to be. Remember what I said. The more refined the substance is, the more harsh its effects.
That
The
makes
more
sense.
quicker it can act.
Because it's
Yeah.
process.
Well, I don't have any.
That was quicker. It's often quicker acting. Yeah. But I think what you said before, Ramon, about that talk you want to do with that next what you want to do with Greg, because when you look at a lot of these things, they all come back to your environment and your diet. And like you said, and I've seen some of the photos you put up with regards to some of the places you go walking and that, and they are
just another
very still natural areas. Daniel Boone country still very natural, isn't it?
Blood. It's a high middle grade herb. You can use it quite often, and obviously don't overdo it. But it's much better than using blood thinners. Blood thinners are radical. I'm glad that you no longer have migraines there, normalization. Okay, so I'm not hearing anything anymore. I'm not sure if there's something happened on the Skype.
No, I'm just letting you talk to the folks. I figure that you're responding to their questions. I take it.
I'm guessing maybe something's happened and I've been kicked.
Oh, is your phone dying? Hello? I think we lost him, Andy.
Yeah, I think something's died.
Well, with that, we'll wrap it up.
Too,
yeah, I'm going to attach that. I'm going to attach that video for. I do that.
I'm asking the group if you can hear me on the stream because I can't hear anybody.
We're just going to wrap it up because your phone is dying, right? Well, everybody, thanks for coming, and I hope this helped you out. And I thought it would be important to put it up for you.
I don't know what happened. Somehow this connected to my Bluetooth.
Oh.
How long ago did you guys stop hearing me?
Just about 10 seconds ago. Not very long.
Yeah.
Did you hear me say what I had to say about Twan?
Again, just in case.
Was very scratched.
Okay, the Twan Qiang is something you can take. That's the Osha root. Something you can take reliably, but it does have some side effect if you get into the toxic levels. But it's much better than blood thinners. However, I can't tell you not to take your blood thinners, and it's very important that you take things before you start the warfarin. Once you get started with warfarin, then you're dialed in. You can't just jump off of it. So Twan Qiang is not a direct swap for blood thinners, but it is a good blood invigorator. Do I treat a disease different when it's diet related versus pollution related? Yes, absolutely. All etiology changes change the diagnosis and the treatment method. You're welcome, Renegade. You're welcome, Prime. I hope everybody enjoyed it. This very
impromptu.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very erudite subject. It's
Yes.
very detailed area of the EPMC work, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
Unbroken. I'm also going to leave my clinic's address in here, and you can always get a hold of me. At that clinic.
I'll
and
put
schedule.
I'll put whatever you want in the description, Ramon.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, help people to get, because they may want to schedule this kind of herbal consult, or they might want to do a life consult, or they might want to do an I Ching consult. I do all the Chinese science, including the Chinese astrology, which is different than the Western astrology. It's based on time.
They
knew the solar system changed. They knew the solar system changed, so they changed their astrology to be based on time instead of on the planets. What'd you ask?
I say we also leave the links to those papers. If that's okay too.
Yeah. The ones that he has, definitely put those in there.
I will. I'll put it all in the description. All right. Well, that'll do it. We're right at almost at the 2-hour level. So make sure you guys.
That's very good, Prime. As above, so below. 100%.
Click the links. Yep.
Yep.
All right.
Well, thanks once again, Ramon.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
You're welcome. And I hope that sparks some interesting discussion about the charge distributive networks. And now people can go forward and they know that Ben is not completely off his rocker talking about this stuff. But even he, I don't think, knows to what degree.
Yeah.
And that's why we do the science. That's why we do the research.
That's right. Yeah.
I hope people go out and repeat the experiment. If they're qualified acupuncturists. If not, figure out a different kind of experiment for the charge distributor. If you're a massage therapist, for example, you could do similar experiments.
And maybe you can help me with this tingling I have in my thumb and 2 fingers from throwing.
I
heard something.
When we get off of live stream, we'll talk in a second.
Okay. All right, folks, we're going to say goodnight. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you again very soon. Got some good stuff coming. All right. Take care now.